Would you like to improve your crafting techniques by watching and crafting along with your favourite Hochanda guest demonstrators, all from the comfort of your own home? If the answer is yes, then we are very excited to invite you to Craftalong, where you, our presenters and guests, will create an amazing array of projects throughout the year. So tune in, be inspired and create with Craftalong, your monthly crafting workshop.
Hello, good afternoon, and it's that time everybody looks forward to every month, isn't it, Hayley?
We do love a Craftalong, don't we?
Oh, we love a Craftalong. So we're hoping you're sitting comfortably. You've got your sewing machine, you've got your Craftalong itself. But it's still possible to buy, isn't it, Hayley?
It is indeed, yeah. I mean, and it is a beautiful one to go for. I mean, as you'll see, as the 2 hours progress, we're going to be teaching you the basics of quilting right the way through, hopefully, binding your finished quilt as well. But we're not going to do it on the large scale of those fabulous quilts you're going to be able to create with your Craftalong. We're going to do a smaller version, which is actually done with the fabrics that are left over, so you could potentially be making a couple of cushions as well.
Oh, I like that. I love matching things. Matching things are fabulous. Now, if you haven't yet got your Craftalong and you're thinking, do you know what? I'd still like to do this, because you can always watch on rewind.
You can.
It is still available, as we said, for you to buy. Now, you've got 2 different options of your gorgeous fabrics. So here we can see we've got our gorgeous purple. I love this. Look at this. The fabrics are amazing, Hayley.
They're absolutely beautiful to work with. And if this is the first time that you've ever been creating a quilt, it's a lovely basic design. Just made up of half square triangles, which I'll explain to you in a little while.
Okay.
But basically you're looking at squares that you're stitching together in a variety of formations, just to give you that gorgeous overall look. You've got 9 different fabrics featuring in here, so you're getting a lot of fabric. And that quilt will actually sit on the top of a king-size bed.
Oh, so it's big.
It's big, yeah. If you want it to drape, then you're looking at a double, but nothing's stopping you kind of using it in a different way. You don't have to follow the pattern. We won't come around, knock on your door and tell you doing it a different way. That's entirely up to you, but yeah, beautiful to work with.
Gorgeous. And then we have got a second option for you, which is, I mean, the blue again is divine. I genuinely, when I say this, couldn't choose between the 2 sets.
Well, Paola had that decision to make, and it was probably about an hour ago that she decided in the end.
Only the
hour. It took her that long, and she's gone for the blue.
Okay.
So Paola's going to be working with the blue fabric during the Craftalong.
Does that mean you're working with the purple?
I am indeed.
I thought so. There you go. So the details are on screen. Obviously, I'm going to just give you the details, and then we're going to start the Craftalong. So 2 payments of £40 if you want to go for it. 713236. Just one last thing is that does qualify, because it's your first payment is £40 for the Freedom Frenzy that's going on. So just make sure you pop that promo code when you're checking out, and then you'll get, if you're a Freedom member, you'll get a nice £6.97 off.
You will indeed.
Which is always
gives you
good.
a whole month's membership as well. Well, if you're not a Freedom member already.
Indeed.
Because you'll already have it, won't
Indeed it does. So without further ado, I think you're going to...
Time to get cracking.
Assume the position. Here's the website. We've got some tools on the show. Now, if you are crafting along... Oh, I need to ask for the tablet, actually, so I can follow on what you're chatting about. So do send us pictures of your work, perhaps as you're going along, you know, your sections, because we always love to see that. As you can see, we've got some extras on the show that you might want to pop into your basket. We've got mats, scissors. We've got that magic iron. I love that iron. I could play with that iron all day, which is a weird thing to say. And it also, please, 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 if you have got any questions for Hayley, send them into studio@hochanda.com, or you can pop a little note on our Facebook page. And without further ado, it's over to Hayley and Paola.
Hello. How you feeling?
I'm so excited, I cannot tell you. I think I fell in love with sewing a lot of the time, watching you and watching other experts here at Hochanda, because your passion for sewing and quilting and soft crafts is just unrivaled.
Well, I love it. I mean, I've been crafting and sewing for quite a long time, and it's lovely when we get new people get involved. I'm sure many of you have been following Paola and seen on her sewing journey, which you're doing really well.
I owe so much of it to you, because you not only have inspired me, but also have taught me so much, and I'm cannot wait to get started.
Lovely. Well, obviously you can see that I've just unboxed my kit, being the purple one. Paola, I've already unboxed yours, and you'll find that you've actually got 9 different fabrics in there. Apologies if this is very crunchy as I open it with the microphone, but I just wanted you to see exactly what happens when you receive this. So you've got your 9 fabrics, absolutely beautiful fabrics to work with, and of course all perfectly coordinated. So the first thing is for us to get used to knowing our fabrics. So within your kit, you may well have noticed you also had a plastic bag that had got obviously the gorgeous picture of your quilt that you're going to be looking at as time goes on. But you will also have an open out piece, which is the piece that's got your pattern. So we'll talk about this in a few moments as well. So that's your pattern, that's the layout. There's a lot of triangles, a lot of squares, as you can see on here, and a lot of text, but don't worry too much about that because it does simplify down as you're working with this. So I'll explain that more to you as you go on. When you open it up, you will see that these particular quilts, there were originally 4 different designs with these, so you've got them detailed here. We're working with, I think it's the winter and the summer, is it, that we've got? Or is it the winter and the spring? I can't remember, but yeah, the spring. So the winter and the spring here. So it's detailing. So within these, you can see you're getting a lot of fabric. 9 fabrics. The first fabric being your paisley. You've actually got, well, it's a little over 1.5 yards of those. So all the fabrics detailed in here, way more than you can possibly need for your quilt. In fact, can I quickly show you? Because here, this is what's left over from when I made the quilt behind.
Wow.
So in here, there's loads, absolutely loads of fabric left over.
And in my experience, in my very week-long experience instead of decades, that is enough to make a lot of projects, isn't it?
And coordinating projects, that's the key thing, because you've got exactly the same fabric.
Cushions.
I even kept the little tiny bits that are pulled away there, because you could use that for stuffing if you wanted to. So that is all left over from the quilt when you're making it up. So we've got loads of fabric there.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea.
Don't throw anything away. First rule of sewing. Then as we look at it, it will actually explain to you basically all the different cuts that you're going to do. So it will explain to you here, you've got your paisley fabric, you've got your flowers, you've got your diamonds, you've got your leaves, you've got your fans, and all the other fabrics that are featuring within here. Now, you need to get to know the fabrics as to the descriptions, because that's where it can get a little bit confusing. But if you flip it over, you will see that you've got, obviously, your blue there, so that's the one that Paola's working with, and you'll see fabric 1, and it says C, as in the word C, because we're looking at the seasons quilts, and it's the second in the series. Well, we don't have to worry about any of that. You only need to look at that initial letter. So that's fabric, or number should I say, so fabric 1, fabric 2, fabric 3, and so on as you work your way around. Just ignore where it says SEA and the number 2 behind there. Equally, I'm working on the one at the bottom there, so I'm going to ignore SEA and the number 4 there, because I'm only interested in that initial number. So what I actually did when I was playing around and learning about my fabrics, I just did myself a little sheet. This could be just done on a piece of A4 paper. And detailing, basically putting little boxes. So I've got number 1, which is called paisley, and I put a little snippet of the fabric there so as I could recognise it. Number 2, flowers, and again, just a little snippet of the fabric, diamonds, and so on. And these names are how they're referred to within the actual instructions. So it makes it nice and easy. And you will find that as you go through it, first of all, it's a lot of words, it's a lot of numbers, and it does seem very confusing. But those pennies all soon start dropping in. And then away you go.
Also, one of the things I have learned in this week-long experience is the fact that if you make a mistake, you can always fix it by unpicking it.
That's it. You can unpick. There's always a way to get around something. So
it's brilliant.
And there will be mistakes along the way. I'm not going to draw attention to my blue quilt. There are mistakes in there, but it looks fabulous, and it doesn't matter. You just kind of put a different slant on things. So I'm going to let you have that, Paola, so as you can refer to that now. You have got your different fabrics in there. So, as we said, you've got your paisley and so on. So, you decide which of these you're going to work with initially. Now, I suggest we look at the paisley because that's the one that the binding for the quilt is going to be cut from as well. So, we'll just move the others to one side just for the time being. And something I should have mentioned as well, other things that you will need as you're working with, you're obviously going to need your fabric from your kit, but bring my little crib sheet in. Wadding, because of course you will need wadding as time goes on. You won't need all of these. This is the itinerary, so yeah, have a look at this. Hopefully we're going to get all this covered in. So yeah, we're ticking things off. Oh, that's what I had to do before we even get started as well. So you can see it's good to plan things out, because that way you can kind of check, you can double check, triple check sometimes.
And also the other thing is, once you have, you know, you have that, you can refer back.
You can, yeah, and especially because you probably wouldn't find that you'd be creating this in one sitting, so it kind of gives you a point that you can work to and so on. So I've got our fabrics, so we're going to identify all our fabrics which we've spoken of, and then the first thing is you'll go back to your instructions, which I've lost, there they go, and we're going to look at paisley. Now with the paisley, you'll see on there, it's telling you that you need 3 strips. So when we're talking about strips, we're talking about edge to edge, so selvage to selvage, you'll sometimes hear that called. And that's basically where it comes off the machine. And there's often a white band on each side of the fabric, so that will depict that. So we're going to cut pieces, strips that are 8 7/8, so just shy of 9 inches. By 40. Now 40 is the actual width of the fabric, so we don't need to worry about that. So those are strips. Those strips will actually become our binding. Paisley fabric 1 is the only one that you need to cut those strips off. So you've got slightly more of that particular fabric than you have of the others. And it's always a good idea to cut your strips, cut your squares as well. Now, dependent on your confidence, you might want to cut your squares first, because you can always find another fabric to do your binding if you make any mistakes. But you're not going to make any mistakes, I'm sure of that. So you can see there, and it's telling you literally there, so you're going to cross cut 9 squares, and those 9 squares need to be 8 7/8 and so on. So all I've done when I've been doing it is actually cut your strips to that width to start with. So we'll start off. Now, I'm going to bring in my larger cutting mat, just while I explain this to you. Sorry, my sewing machine covers on top of that. Now, this particular one, I don't know if you've got it on the show, it will be on the website, but we have got some fabulous cutting mats on the show.
Yes, we do.
So I'm going to start off with my fabric here. Now, preparing your fabric is something that is important, because when it comes to you, it'll have been sitting in a box and you'll have lots of kind of fold marks and things like that on it. So it's always a good idea to give it a good press to start with. And then it depends on how confident you are as a sewer or a cutter as to how you're going to cut your fabrics. Now, we're going to fold it, and what I suggest you do is you fold, and if you look at your cutting mat, it will give you a guide there. So you can see we've got 0 in the bottom corner of my mat there. So there you go, 0 down there, and obviously I can see, because I'm cutting 8 7/8, it's kind of close to 9 inches. So, talking about the size of these, you don't have to cut it to exactly that same size unless you're wanting to go for the dimensions we're talking about with the quilt. You could go slightly larger, but then you do run the risk of running out of your fabrics. But if you wanted to just cut them to 8-inch squares because you're not confident to do the kind of the fractions, then you can do that. You'll just be doing a slightly smaller version of the quilt. So again, that's something that can change. And as time goes on, you'll probably find yourself doing that with your own fabrics. Anyway, so we're going to fold the fabric. I've not pressed it, but we won't worry too much about that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roughly fold it, say about 10 inches, because we know we've got a little bit extra there then for actually cutting the strips. So fold it, so from the fold line to the raw edge there is about 10 centimetres. And we're just going to do this roughly. We're just going to fold it along that edge and kind of pleat your fabrics in. Now, you'd usually be doing this on a larger table, maybe
I'm not sharing
your kitchen table. Don't worry too much, because what we might not actually cut these, Paula, so don't worry too much.
So you do a pleat.
So you're basically pleating your fabrics, and you might stand up and press these in place. So if you're doing this at home, I'd certainly suggest you do that. I'd also potentially suggest that you don't cut into this fabric during the craft along, which I know is a bit of a strange thing to say, because what I would suggest you do is potentially go back and watch this. Because of course you've got one kit, you don't want to get it wrong.
Right, you can see who's the really novice.
So I've actually cut loads of, well, we're cutting some smaller squares, so it'll be easier. So sitting down, it's a bit tricky when you're working with large pieces of fabric, which is why I thought that we'll do a smaller version. So you can see on mine, I've pretty much folded it flat. So then what I would do is I'd take a ruler, like so. Perhaps one of the large ones. We've got these on the show, I think. And then I would actually find the cutting mark that I need. So we're looking at, obviously you take it right the way down to the 0. Your fabric can come off the edge.
Oh, that's a good
like so. And then you can go up to the 10 there. But you've got these horizontal markings here.
Yep.
So when you actually put your ruler on your fabric, use the guides that you've got. It's always a bit tricky to see unless you're actually sitting there. But there you will be able to see the guidelines. So I can take this, and don't worry too much about the folds that you've got.
Okay.
We're looking at those sections there. So what I would do is I'd line it up and trying to get it as straight as I can.
Yeah.
Line up, say, about there. In fact, it doesn't have to be bang on there. Let's pull it in a little bit so you can see. So I'm lining it up there and I'm lining it up there. So as when I actually cut there, I have got a straight edge.
And that's important,
And
isn't
that's
it?
important to have that straight edge. But then what I would actually do is measure my 8 3/4 along, and that's when you do your next cut and so on. And that means the strips that you've cut are then 8 3/4. Alternatively, you can do it that way and cut them that length if you're wanting to,
But
which
that
is the
makes
best way to do
it,
it because it's saying about the 40 inches wide.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So you're cutting them horizontally that way, and then you start chopping into them like that.
Yeah,
But as I say, it's a bit tricky to do on this scale, so
Yeah.
we're going to do it on the smaller scale, and we're just
perfect.
going to cut 4-inch squares. So I'm going to pop that to one side, which is why when you're doing that cut, you need to get those right, and I would probably double or triple check those if I was at home anyway.
Is it measuring twice, cut once?
They do say that, yeah, that's right, exactly that. So, so what we're actually going to do, we're going to take part of the pattern, and we're going to actually work along to part of that pattern. So, what we're going to do is, if we open it up, this is the pattern of the quilt. So with this, you have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares wide, and it's 10 squares down. So you've got 80 squares in total that you're going to be constructing.
Okay.
Which is why we're doing a smaller version. But the concept is the same. We're actually going to be working on this inner 16. So the inner 16 will cover the centre, as you can see, that diamond, and kind of the outside parameter.
Perfect.
But I will talk about, basically what we're doing, you would do exactly in your 8 blocks normally, but we'll work on that smaller section there. Okay? And because of that, what I've done is I've done you a copy, so you should have a piece like this, Paola.
Yeah.
And this is basically, I just scanned in the chart, which isn't a bad idea to do anyway, because if you do scan it in, you can tick off those pieces as you put in place. And you can keep a record of where you've done it. So it's not a bad idea to do that. So perhaps treat yourself and photocopy that. But we're going to work on this here. So we're going to pop that to one side just for the time being. And I think we've pretty much finished with that at the moment. Just follow your instructions, as I say, for each of those colours. Now, we have got, this again is from the leftover fabric. Paola, I'm going to give you that piece because that is selvage to selvage. So if you imagine that being your full piece of fabric, but obviously we've trimmed it down for the purposes of cutting our squares.
By the way, can I mention how amazingly soft and gorgeous this fabric is?
Yeah.
It is just...
It's a dream to work with. It presses beautifully.
It does. It just feels like silk, even though it's cotton. It's 100% cotton.
Now I'm going to test you, Paola. I've given you a piece of fabric. Can you tell me which number from the pattern that one is?
Well, I kind of had it because
You've
I
already
had
had a little sneaky look in there.
But that would be the I would say the parasol, but I think it kind of...
Well, it is actually called the parasol. And if you have a little look on the chart that I gave you with the little fabrics on, and actually umbrellas, I think it's called.
Oh, umbrellas, well.
So, yeah, it's fabric number 8.
Number 8, yeah.
It's funny because I kept calling it umbrella and parasols because it does look like a parasol.
A parasol, yeah, that's what I would think, yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't matter as long as you can identify it. I've actually got fabric number 7, which is the one with the butterflies. I do like this one.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
It's one of my favourites.
But it's hard to have a favourite. I mean, like you were saying,
Yeah.
until an hour before the show, I didn't know which one I go.
Tricky
You know,
to-
the
tricky to
colorways
choose.
and even the fabrics are just amazing.
Isn't it gorgeous? But the beauty is within the fabric you've got all those different elements. So it doesn't matter which fabric you're working with. The purples, the pinks, the blues, they are all there. So absolutely spot on getting the colours together. And the nice easy ones when you've got your fabrics left over that you can actually pull them together and add extras in to kind of eke out what you've got left.
Right.
So we're going to be cutting some squares.
Okay.
That's the first stage. So you've got your full width, which dependent on your cutting mat, you might have a large cutting mat like I've got. Paola, yours is slightly smaller, so you folded your fabric over, which is fine. I'm going to work on the full width, and if Paola, you work on yours as you've got there, which is fine. Now we do need to cut them into 4-inch strips because we're going to be we're working with 4-inch squares.
Yeah.
So we've got some rulers in front of us here. So I'm going to go for the larger one.
For the smaller
Does
one.
that fit on yours nicely?
So the one that you have got is a 24 by 6
It is, yeah,
and a half.
24 by 6, so 6.5 on this particular one. The half is because if you are wanting to, let me just flip that over there. The half is because if you are wanting to turn, make blocks, you've got to have that additional seam allowance. So when you're creating a 6-inch block, so the 6-inch is the bit that you see. You need your seams, and 2/4 inches will make a half an inch.
That makes a lot of
So
sense.
basically, whatever bit, this is only when you're talking about squares, it's a slightly different calculation for other shapes.
Okay.
But with squares, the simplest way of doing a quilt, you're looking at your 6 inches plus your half-inch seam allowance.
Makes a lot of sense.
Same if it was 4 inches, same if it was 12 inches, whatever size you put in that half an inch on, because you can put a 1/4 inch seam on each edge. So what I'm going to do now is just lay mine down. Now, because you're working with a fold, you need to make sure that that fold sits true on your cutting mat, because that is going to be kind of your straight line.
All right.
Fortunate thing with quilting fabrics is they're very forgiving.
Okay.
So even if you've not got it exactly straight, although you design, especially if you're working with like a check or a stripe, it might stand out. But most of them have got very forgiving prints on there, so they're not too bad. So I'm going to bring the ruler in. I'm going to bring in my rotary. In fact, I'm going to treat myself to the Crafter's Dream one, because we've got these ones on the show as well, and I've not worked with these ones. So
that's really nice. Oh, I think I put mine somewhere, but I cannot find it.
Oh, you can borrow mine.
No, I have got one.
You're going to pop off and get yours. Do you want to pop off, or are you all right?
I'll pop and to
okay,
find it.
Pop off. So with these, thing that you just a little bit of housekeeping with regards to a rotary cutter. Obviously, the sharp bit is the blade. And the key thing is, when you are not using your rotary cutter, you need to make sure that that blade is covered. You'll have on this particular one a little slider, so what you often have to do is press down and then slide it, and then you can see that that blade has now been opened up. Now this is a brand new machine, brand new cutter, so you know that blade is going to be very, very sharp. So whenever you're putting it down, when you're finished with it, always get into the habit of actually closing that. Now with these, it's not just a slide, so I can slide that and nothing is happening, and that's a safety feature in case any little fingers come along and try and do it. So you have to actually press it in and then slide it. So it's kind of a two-action reveal and closure with that particular blade. So, and it's a standard size, the 45mm. Those blades are very easy to get hold of. But there's a variety of different sizes, so you might already have one of yours. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line up my ruler, and you can use any of the lines to get your kind of vertical line, and that's going to sit on your fold.
Okay.
Because all we're going to do is basically square off the fabric. So I'm using, I don't know even what line it is, ½ inch, something like that down the end, and I'm just following it across. I'm going to hold my rotary, my ruler firmly. Now this is personal preference. I do tend to stand up when I'm cutting, but for the purposes of today, I'm going to stay seated. If you need to stand up, by all means, please do. And all you're going to do is do a straight edge. Now, if your fabric, like you've got there, is slightly narrower than your ruler, just slide the ruler so as it comes towards you.
Okay,
So it's actually going off at the bottom, but use it. So still use those two edges to give you your straight line. All you need to make sure is, because we're doing 4-inch squares, that you don't take it too far down, that you can't get a 4-inch there. So slide it up a little bit, maybe to about there. And then you're just going to do a cut across. Now you do tend to, when you're cutting, they do say that you should always cut away from yourself, but there are going to be situations when you cut across. You never ever cut towards yourself. Now the rotary, have you noticed how the top part slides round? So if you
that one is unlocked. I need to unlock it.
Oh, is it locked underneath? Sorry.
That was like kind of, I think that's...
See, these rotary ones are brilliant because you don't actually have to move the mat at all. You can just rotate the mat to where it needs to go.
I'm trying to find, because I know it has got...
flip it over if you need to.
Oh, yeah.
You got it. I heard it click then, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, you know, one of those ones, live TV today, it's been... Oh, yeah.
There you go. So what will happen with the rotary one is the base stays kind of true, sticks onto your table, and then you can rotate the top one round. I've not actually worked with one of these. Have you locked it, unlocked it and locked it again?
Yeah, probably.
That's easily done.
It's
easy done. Right, meantime, I'm going to cut my straight edge that we've got here.
Okay.
So I'm just going to hold that, and then, as I say, I'm going to stand up actually, if that's okay, because I'm doing quite a long cut here. So again, reveal my blade. I'm going to hold down, hold firmly. You can actually get things that will, little handles and things that will secure to your ruler if you're wanting to. And all we're going to do is keep your fingers out of the way. So you've obviously got your finger grips where you can put your finger on your rotary cutter there, or your thumb. And then basically we're just going to go in a smooth action, making sure that it's lined up squarely at the bottom. Go and cut a straight edge across like so. Don't press too hard because you might find yourself scooting off, but you can see there, because you've got a brand new blade in there, it's going to cut pristinely. Cut through 2 layers of fabric there. You can cut through multiple layers, to be fair, but you should really be changing your blade each time you do a new project, as in a new quilt, because you're going to be doing a lot of cuts as time goes on. I don't throw anything away, so I keep those in my scrap box just in case I'm wanting to stuff cushions or different bits and pieces and so on. And then all I'm going to do now is measure, and I'm going to rotate my mat round. Paola, you might want to do the same. Have you done your cut as well?
Yeah,
Perfect.
I've done my cut, yeah.
So we've got a straight edge.
Yeah.
So all I'm going to do now is I need to cut it at 4 inches on the far side. So I'm going to move my rotary cutter, my ruler over. So is that edge of the ruler is now sitting on the 4, down there, and then I'm going to cut down there.
So 4.
So where you've got your raw edge, that's it, 4. Perfect. That's it.
Yeah.
Make sure it's square on the fold again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then cut across.
Okay. I'm just going to go like that.
That's it. And again, if you find it easier, rotate your mat. That's perfect. And then again, I'm just going to stand up and do mine. And then again, cut across. This is where you can pretty much do your pieces, your patches. That's what we're cutting at the moment, because patches become blocks. That's where the word patchwork comes from. So now my strip measures 4 inches across. Yeah. Obviously, if you're working the pattern from your Craftalong, then you'd have a wider piece of fabric, because your fabric would actually measure 8 7/8. So you're looking at around that width, so the distance between my fingers there. But we're working on a smaller scale to make it easy. Okay?
Amazing. Yeah.
All right? Happy?
Yeah, very happy. It had 4 locks, not 2.
4 locks?
Yeah,
my
so,
goodness.
So this is why I kind of was. It works really well. I really like it.
It's useful because it is just you moving the mats rather than your fabric. So yeah.
We do have it on the the rotating one. That is a 12 by 12 that
That's
we have got.
I've got the 12 by 12 one here for when. In fact, we can work on that one in a few moments. So yeah, it's pink if you're going for the 12, and it is just rotate as well. And I think there's a variety of colours if I remember rightly with these ones. So yeah.
You know what? I did a show with Kerry.
Locks.
Yeah, and this is why, because it was the smaller one that I did with Kerry, and then I was looking just for two, and then the large one has got 4.
Right,
hence my
makes sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use that rotary one now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fabrics and I'm going to fold them in half like so, because we can cut through 4 layers of fabric without any issue. Yeah. And then I'm going to just literally place it down. Again, one of those raw edges going across, nicely lined up there, as you can see. Obviously, it's automatically going to line up at 4 inches because our cut is perfect, Paola, isn't it?
Well, yours more than mine.
I doubt that very much. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to move the fabrics just so as when I come to do my vertical cut, then I'm just where there is a line that I can follow. So just smidging over, but try not to waste too much fabric because we don't like wasting fabric.
No. But I love your idea of, even if it's the smallest amount for stuffing or filling.
There's loads, you can use them for all sorts of different projects. Some people will actually stitch them together and make pieces out of them, and there's loads you can do. Now, because I'm only doing a small cut, I'm not going to bother standing up. So again, I've just lined my ruler up there, so it's on that line there, and I'm just going to take my rotary cutter. Now, there you go, naughty Hayley. I didn't close my blade when I put it down. Ooh. Slap my own knuckles there, naughty Hayley. So yes, do get into the habit, because you could get called away, could be the phone goes, and we don't want anybody getting hold of that shouldn't have it. So holding your ruler again firmly, reveal your blade, and then in smooth action, press and cut. And then again, that will take your fabrics away. Wow. Okay?
This fabric cuts so beautifully.
Doesn't it? It's really easy. Now, when you're working on several pieces, we can actually continue and take the ruler, so you don't move your fabric, you move your ruler to 4 inches.
Of course.
And then again, hold it firmly, and again, just cut.
So
and there you go, you can see you've got a 4-inch square. And then I can move it again. Now it's moved slightly then when I picked up the ruler, so just make sure it goes back in place, and again I can put that down on what would be your kind of 8-inch.
3, 4.
So it depends on how wide your fabric is, how many of those cuts you can get. And again, if you're working with your Craftalong kit, it would be 8 7/8 that you're cutting. So you'd have a larger square than the one that we're looking at. In fact, I don't know if I've got a larger square to show you. Well, these ones are where I actually cut into it, so I don't think I've got one in there. But it'd be on a larger scale anyway.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah. And
Getting on okay there,
yeah.
Paola?
Sorry, I'm a little bit slower. But
That's okay. That's not an issue. It's better to be slow. You don't get any prizes for completing anything any quicker than the next person. Yeah. So, yeah. And it's all about the enjoyment. You could, if you wanted to, actually layer those up and cut through multiple layers at the same time, but you've got to be relatively confident, because if you cut in the top layer wrong, then you're going to cut all the ones underneath wrong as well. Okay. So we're just going to go with one of those little piles that you've got. Okay. And then all we're going to do is we're going to cut it on the diagonal. Ooh. Now, you could use the little markings that you've got on your mat if you're wanting to, because you will always have diagonal lines there. So you can see that you've got your 45 degrees. So one corner would go on 45 and one would go on 45, and you're going to kind of cut between the two. Some rulers will have a line on there that you can follow, or as long as you've got it corner to corner, then you can cut. Now, if you find that your fabrics move, just use your nail or something like that just to kind of nudge them into place. And then you're just going to cut on the diagonal like so. Okay. And then away you go. Yeah. And there you've got. Now, just while Paola's doing her cut, I'll explain to you what we've got here now. So we've taken a square, we've cut it on the diagonal, and what you've actually created now is 2 sets of triangles. Now, this is where sometimes quilting talk does sound a little bit gobbledygook, because these are now half square triangles. So straight away it sounds like a bit of an alien language, but basically what it is a square, but you've cut it into triangles. So they are half squares and they're triangles. Yep. Likewise, you might come across a quarter square triangle, and that's where you're taking your fabric. Now, Paola, you don't need to do what I'm doing here, but you would cut it on the opposite diagonal, and then you're making quarter square triangles. So basically, it's a quarter of a square and it's a triangle. So it's not as complicated as it sounds. No. They're just funny words to get used to. But you'll get used to them as time goes on. Okay. So that's how you cut your triangles. So how are you feeling so far? Does that all make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. You explain everything so well.
Oh, bless you. So we're going to move those little pieces, because we can put those to one side just for the time being. Yeah. But I have been a bit of a busy bee. So you should have in your tray, you should have your fabrics already. Yeah. So all we're going to do is we're going to make triangles out of, I think it's pattern number 1 and 2, I think. So when we're laying these out, you'll get to know them. This one is your lace. It's called lace, and that's fabric number 9. Okay. Yeah. That one is parasols, I think, or umbrellas, I think it's called, which is number 8. And it is a good idea that when you've actually cut them, you do put your little clips on like so.
Are they quilting clips?
These are quilting clips, yeah, and I'm sure we'll have these on the website. The butterflies, that's fabric number 7. Okay. Then fabric number 6, which I'm going to put in the next row, that one is flowers. I think it's called flowers. Next one, number 5, is called fans. The next one that you've got is number 4, and that one is just called leaves. I haven't cut all of those because we won't need all of them anyway, but there you go, put those there. Then we move on to fabric number 3, which is diamonds. Oh. Fabric number 2, which I've forgotten what it's called. What's number 2?
And number 2 is flowers.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes, that's right. Number 6 was fields. Field, not flowers, sorry. That one's flowers. And then finally, number 1. And number 1 is the one that you've got your binding that will be cut out of as well, which is your paisley. Yeah. So these are your 9 fabrics. Now, I don't get very precious about the direction of the pattern. Some of the fabrics have got a direction to them. I would say if it's the first time that you've ever quilted, then don't worry at all. Because if you do have a look at my quilts, you will notice, especially with the butterflies, some butterflies are going vertically, some are going horizontally, some are going to the right, the left, some of them are going down. But overall, when you look at the design, you don't really notice it. And I think don't put too much pressure on you at yourself. So you see here, these butterflies are flying downwards, which is never a good look for a butterfly, really. It's never ever good news if a butterfly is going in that direction. But then then you'll find the diamonds is another one. Some of those will go horizontally, some of them will go vertically, and there you go. You can see your butterfly there going to the side. It doesn't matter, and as I say, at this stage, I wouldn't worry too much. Something worth thinking of if you're wanting to build your confidence is to try and find fabrics that don't have a direction, and then you don't have to worry about it at all. So again, we're not going to worry. So we're going to go back to our little chart now, Paola, because we need to start making some triangles back into squares. So we're going to start off with row 1.
Okay.
So if we look here, you can see it says 9. And as I said, just ignore all the rest there. So number 9 there. I'll have to apologise for the quality of my photocopy here. It's not brilliant, but you can see you've got the number 9 and then you've got your C. So ignore that bit. And we're looking at fabric number 9. So we need number 9, which is lace. So we're going to take one of those triangles.
The fabrics, everything, they're so beautiful.
It's quality, isn't it? You just know it's quality that you've got. And the next one that we're working with, you'll see, is number 4, which is your leaves. So we find number. And this is why it's a good idea to have them in these little clips. Cut out your triangles and literally make them as you are.
And also it's easier to tidy up when you are doing it in sessions, doesn't it?
Now this, I'll be honest, is probably a longer winded way to the way that I personally did it at home, but I'm used to quilting. What you could do if you wanted to, and this is kind of like the mathematical way of doing it, is do yourself a chart where you've got the numbers 1 to 9 across the top, like a spreadsheet, and the numbers 1 to 9 down at the bottom, and then figure out all of these squares. So where you've got number 9 going horizontally on your chart, bring it down to number 4 and do a number one. And then that way you know how many multiples of those combinations you need. But as a new quilter, I would say to do it the way that we're doing, which is longer winded, but there's less kind of chance of any errors. So those are the 2 pieces that are going to come together for our first little square. So all you do is you take a quilt clip or a pin, and this is a good tip for any project. You put the clip on the side that you're going to sew. So that means I could drop that down, it could flip over, I could pick it up anywhere, and I know still I need to stitch down that down.
I love that idea, because that's one of the things I struggled this week when I was putting together. It's like, oh, I needed to flip every time that I had to even pin it to see it. So now that I'm going to take that.
So that's the first one. Now if you were at home and you were working from your chart, you might want to, I don't know, put a scribble through that because you've done that one, or a highlighting pen or something like that. This is actually a heat erasable marker, so I could just iron over this afterwards and it would disappear and I could reuse it. Or you could just tick the box or whatever. So we've done that one. So we're going to work our way across the first 8 squares. We'll have a little chat as we go.
Okay, so then I'm going to go for 1 and then number 3. 1, 2, 3, so diamonds. Okay, and then I love
so you're matching up the diagonal line. And this is where, if you're taking the time with your cutting, then you shouldn't have any kind of little errors with your marking up. Doesn't matter which fabric goes on the top or which goes on the bottom, because you can kind of rotate it when you need to. And then just kind of keep a little pile to the side of you of those. So I've done the first one, I've done the second one, so now I need a number 8 and I need number 1, so that's number 8. And number 1. There you go. Now hopefully I've cut enough triangles. You might find with your first 2 fabrics I didn't quite cut enough.
That's because I can go, now I know how to do it.
But you know how to cut
and then I kind of go in and do it.
There you go. Myself. So next one I've got 6 and 7. So where am I? That's 9, that's 7 and that's 6. So 6 and 7 coming together. So this is kind of the most complicated at this stage. As I say, if you take your time and break it down, that makes it nice and easy. And by all means, as Alex said at the top of the hour, if you've got any questions that you're wanting to ask, then do get in touch. But I can't emphasise how fabulous it is when you're putting this together. And Catherine, thank you. Catherine's just saying that she's finding it easy to follow. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I have got a lot in our ears as well. Shall I say? Because it's like we said that way.
I'm not getting involved with this one.
No, but it's like apparently Catherine did say that she attended a class and she learned nothing, and she already has learned so much from you in this little in half an hour. So well, this is it, and there's different ways of learning, different ways of teaching. So you can't comment on that one now.
let's have a little look. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, I've lost counts as well. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've done those, and then number 5, I've done that one. So it does make sense to tick these off, because otherwise you might end up with a couple of them, especially if you're having a little chat as you go in, which is a nice way of doing it, to be honest, isn't it?
And I think for the end, well, shall I say you can find, of course, the Craftalong will be on the website, and not only for the 2 months, not only for this, you know, the 60 days,
that's
but
right,
for longer than that. So you can always buy it today, and then you rewind.
I think it stays on the YouTube channel, doesn't it? I think so. You can go back to it. And of course, what we're doing here is you're working with basically a dark fabric and a light fabric. Although with some of these, they're kind of mid-range, so you wouldn't necessarily tick a box and say that's a light one, and tick a box and say that's a dark one. But this could be just 9 fabrics that you've got within your stash. So you could replicate this after the Craftalong quite easy. Lost count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah,
so I've got to there. So that my next one is this one, which is 7 and 6. So tick that one.
And one of the things that, because for somebody who am completely new to quilting, I had done a couple of blogs, and this week, you know, after seeing everybody, including you, of course, Hayley here at Hochanda, I was so inspired to just like, you know, I need to make sure that I learn properly and how to, and you know, it's the joy that handling the fabrics, the joy of cutting, the joy of sewing. It's so enjoyable. And one of the things I loved, and I kind of was mentioning, is the fact that when from little pieces making a big piece is very, I found it very therapeutic.
People find different scenarios with it. I mean, my mum, bless her, she says, I just don't get the idea of cutting up fabrics just to sew them back together again. And there's a certain amount of, I can see what you're saying with that. But what you're doing is you're changing the fabric, you're giving it a different look, and that's what it's all about. And it's your personal look as well in a scenario like this, where you can actually take your own fabrics and put them together. Now, I've got my little pieces here ready to put together. So I've got one, we're working on the first 2 rows, because the bottom 2 rows I've already put together for us. So we've got 8 squares that we're going to be stitching. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So those are all going to be ready.
Yep.
So for the time being, we can get rid of the rest of our fabrics, but we'll hang on to those, because as I say, we've got those. We could be making many more cushion covers with those, or bags, or whatever you're wanting to. So, and don't forget, this is what you've got left over. I mean, this is from my kit here. I mean, there's and there's some big pieces as well. Those were the scraps, which, as I say, you're probably not going to do an awful lot with those, to be fair. But here, you've got some good sized pieces, and that is the size of the block if you are going to be making. I overmade some of the blocks, but again, I will keep that. And it could be that I'm using that as a panel or making a smaller cushion, but you've got loads of fabric there.
They are absolutely stunning.
Oh, okay, so I'm going to pop that to one side, because we're going to start sewing. This is the exciting bit. So we're going to move everything out of the way.
Including the
that's it. Don't get rid of the ones that you've got your clips on, because we're going to be sewing those together. We need those ones. But everything else we can kind of scoot and move that out of the way. Hang on to your pattern as well, because we'll need that in a little while. And I'm just going to pop my rotary cutting, not my rotary cutting mat, my cutting mat out of the way. Now, of course, we are creating a fabulous quilt. This is what you're creating, Paola. This is the one that you've chosen, the blue. What did you like about the blue?
You know what I love is that it's a very calming. It's one of those ones that I think, but in the summer it's going to be refreshing, and in the winter it's going to be like kind of bringing the beautiful snow scenes. I kind of think like that. But also I like it because it has got a warmth into that blue. It's not just pure. You know what, sometimes blues can be a little
different shades. I mean, when you look in there, there's kind of like earthy tones with the butterfly fabric, especially. There's almost like a stamped effect, but then an ombre with a gorgeous kind of brown tone running through that as well. So the purple one, again, it's a difficult one to go for. The purple, you've got quite a few different shades in there. You've got the almost dark tones of that black backdrop, but then you've got some pinky colours, some peaches in there as well.
Yeah, I do like that one. Yeah, it's just
nice.
I mean, it took me like so long to decide until I literally, the only decision I made it is because I had to make a decision.
Now, I'm going to be working with the Faf Smarter, the 160S. It's a really affordable machine. It's a nice basic machine. Talking of machines, you don't need anything too fancy when it comes to quilting. As long as you've got a machine that's going to allow you to basically do straight stitch, got zigzag on there. This one's a lovely little one to work with. So if you're not already got a sewing machine, I certainly do suggest you look at the one that we're working with. It has got an extension table, which I forgot to go and get out of the cupboard, which is useful when you're working on a larger project. We're only working on something small scale, so we don't have to worry. But the extension table, basically you slide off the accessory box, put the extension table on, and then you've got a larger work area, similar to the machine that Paola's working on.
Yep. And what I like about this one, as soon as I saw it, and I kind of thought, oh, it's really, it feels very young as well. Like
yeah,
kind of, it's just one of the, it's kind of funky. And it's an amazing price. I mean,
yeah, it is a good price. Yeah. And it's not just the machine you're getting loads of additional accessories. And of course, because the Flexi buy on this one, you could become a Freedom member as well.
You are saving £76 plus Flexi.
Good saving.
And if you are not Freedom, can you use Freedom Frenzy? Because if you haven't,
if you haven't used it,
if you haven't used Freedom Frenzy, you could use it and then have got, you know, and then you get £6.97 off, or your free Freedom.
That's it, yeah. Definitely worth going for. It's a nice bundle. Madeira threads are nice as well. Oh, and they've got the little stalk scissors that we've got.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So they are all there. So what we're going to do is we're going to stitch our triangles together to make squares again. So we're going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam, which is a traditional seam for quilting, as you heard me talking about earlier on. But it doesn't have to be that. If you don't want to work with a 1/4 inch, then that's okay. Just make sure it's the continuity throughout your project. Because we are following a pattern and we want them to be a specific size, then really we should be following it. But if you're just doing your own design, then you would kind of, if you wanted to do it slightly wider, you can do. But you're almost wasting a bit of fabric by taking it any wider than you need. This machine has got a little marking on where the bobbin sits, which says 1/4 inch. So with regards to that, you can little kind of line up your fabric there and keep your needle at a straight in the centre swing, and then that way you've got a 1/4 inch seam. And I've popped the thread that I'm using in the bobbin as well. You don't have to, but on this occasion I thought I would. And I've got it on the top as well. So what we're going to do is stitch each of those 8 pieces. So we're going to line them up, drop the foot down on this occasion, and then just do a straight seam. And we don't need those little clips at this stage now, because they've done the job that we needed them to do. They've marked the seam that we're going to be sewing, and all we're going to do is stitch through all 8 of those. So there goes number 1. Now at this stage I'm not concerned which one of those 6 this one is. It doesn't really matter, because we're going to construct them when they come together. You might notice I've got a little bit of wry there. If you have, then it's always a good idea to try and pull your fabrics back on track. Because these fabrics have been cut on the bias, you have got a little bit of give with regards to these, so you do have to be a little bit careful as you stitch, and you might want to put little quilt clips in place, but it's not too bad. Well, that will be lost within the seam allowance anyway. On my machine, I'm just going to chain stitch. Some machines like this, some machines won't be too happy about it. You'll get to know your machine, and what that means is I'm not actually cutting the thread in between these, so I'm just going from one to the next and stitching through on each of those. So just make sure the edge of that fabric is on the edge of there, like so. And then away you go. You sound like you're going super speedy over there, Paola.
Oh, I'm enjoying. I have to say that it's you know, as a paper crafter that has been a professional paper crafter for so many years, suddenly I am one of you at home that is like suddenly falling in love with what it is, a new craft for me, and discovering the joys of handling beautiful fabrics like these ones. This kind of, and I find it so, for me, such a relaxing thing, such a emotion.
And it's nice because obviously we've both worked in the industry for quite some time, especially with paper crafting. And sometimes it's nice to have a breakaway hobby.
It is.
Because sometimes your hobby becomes work, doesn't it? And it is nice if you have got something that you do find that you're a paper crafter. And I'm not saying it takes the love out of it, but sometimes you do find yourself doing things because you've got to rather than because you want to.
Absolutely.
And something like this can be a little bit of a breakaway to kind of get those creative juices flowing again. I always say that sewing and your stitches are pretty much the glue that you would use in your paper crafting.
Yes.
So lots of scenarios are the same, the colour matches, bringing things together. It's not overly complicated, and it's not a great science. It can be one of those things that people are terrified of sewing, thinking it's complicated, and it's not as complicated as you might think.
I
you make your pattern. Lovely.
Yeah.
You're ahead of me. Hey, Paola, the first thing I said to you is don't make me look bad, and you finished.
No,
Hang on.
but I wasn't talking. I was just like sewing, and you were sewing and
No.
I just love it.
Okay, you're having fun. Now, what we need to do is you'll need to separate up those so you can snip the threads that you've got in between, and we're going to press those seams open. So I should have mentioned to pop your iron on, but I think you did that anyway, didn't you? So. And you've got the little prim iron over there, haven't you?
I have, of course, the Mill Shop Online brings the prim iron. It is in my shopping list. I haven't got it just yet. And you know what? I'm so excited to be able to try it. I test it as well.
It's a nice little one, that one. I've actually got the larger one. Now, how do you say it, this one? The Olissa.
Oh, Olissa. Yeah.
It's kind of I'm going to bring it in a moment. I'm just going to separate up my little pieces that we've got here. Oh, you're okay, Paola?
Yeah, I kind of did something that I shouldn't have done.
Oh, at least you caught it.
Yeah, I got it. So what I'm going to do is instead of putting it down, I'm going to just slide it down.
Over. That's it. I was going to say, you can use my pressing mat if you wanted to. Don't worry. So just make sure you're separating those out. I think I've got them all. You'll often hear us talk about pressing your fabrics to the dark side when you're quilting. It is always a good idea, but when you're working with fabrics that have got quite an intensity of colour, it doesn't really make a lot of difference. The main difference would be, say if that was a white fabric or a much paler fabric, then it could be a case of that when you actually fold that through, you would see that seam on the back there. So that's the only reason that we really say that as well. My goodness, this iron needs a good clean. Who's been working with this? Shocking.
Oh, I don't know.
Shocking.
Yeah. But I have to say, my little one, I'm loving. I'm loving it.
Now, with this particular one, it's quite a clever iron, this particular one. So it's one that's recently come to us here at Hochanda. It's taken a few years in design, and it's been designed for working with sewers, because the idea is when you take your hand off, it will lift away from your fabrics. So that way you're not going to scorch any of your fabrics. And as soon as you put your hand on there, it recognises and drops back down. It's got a few design features on it which I think are brilliant. You've got a long cable with this, which is brilliant.
And has it got a rotating pivot at the end for the cable?
Yes, it has. So you don't get, in the past, you may well have had the case with your iron where you kind of pull in that cable and you might get a breakage in there. With this, you can see that it can go in all angles and it's protecting it there. So, yeah, it's very clever. How are you getting on over there, Paola?
Oh, I'm enjoying this so much. I'm just having, and I have to say, I have got a traveling iron, but it doesn't press as nicely as this one does.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any difference.
She might be
honest,
little, but she's fierce. Shakespeare for you.
There you go. Oh, education there as well. And the nice thing about the prim iron and this particular one that we've got here, you've got your different heat settings on it for your different fabrics, and you can add your water if you want in your steam.
Indeed.
Incidentally, when you are working with quilting fabrics, you don't tend to use a steam. You use what we call a dry iron, because the steam can warp your fabrics.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because sometimes if you've done something that's not quite right, you might need to ease it into shape. So you might use it some of the time.
It would be okay if you, for instance, because I found a box full of scraps, and it wasn't scraps. It turned out to be big, but they were very, very crisp, and I had to put some steam. Is that okay to do it beforehand?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. So yes, perfect.
Oh, shall we have a look at the prim iron? Because for £39 and 99 pence, look at the 5-star reviews. 48. Probably soon enough will be my review as well there, because I'm loving this one. I'm loving because it's small, and you have got a freedom price as well, £33 and 99 pence.
Now, I'm just getting myself ready, because what we need to do is now build up those first 2 rows. If I just bring my pattern back in again to show you. So we've stitched all these and we've turned them back into little squares, as you can see there. So basically all we're going to do is 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to get those 4 together as that row, like so. So and just move that just so as I can see. So now I'm looking for number 1 again and fabric number 3. So we're looking for fabric number 1 and fabric number 3, which is that one, I think.
Yeah, that's that one. Yeah.
Fabric number 8. Which one was that? That was the
sorry. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Don't worry. I'm trying to remember. Parasols
so
and 1
and 3 diamonds. Yeah.
6 and 7. I think that's that one. Now, as you're actually laying them down, you'll notice that some of these, the diagonal goes from the bottom to the top, and some of them comes from the top to the bottom, and that's just so as you actually get that diamond shape within the middle there, as you can see. So that's what we're needing to make sure that we have got that formation. So this is the center of your quilt. When you're doing from your pattern, if I bring my pattern back in, you do exactly the same scenario, but obviously you're doing it in a full row of 8 squares there. We're just doing a smaller version of it just because it's easier, and it means we can cover more during this show. And I know we're in the first hour at the moment. Hopefully we're going to have the top of our quilt put together in the first segment of the second hour, and then we're going to go on to putting the wadding in place, and then also putting the backing and the binding in place as well.
I have a mission to make. Do you know why I saw them all together so quickly? It's because I had 2 less than you.
Oh, okay. I will let you put those last 2 together then.
Okay, no worries.
I'm just going to figure mine out here. So where am I? Number 6, which is the forest, isn't it? Number 6 was the field, sorry. Yeah. So field is that one, and number 1, so that needs to go like that one. Then I need number 4, which is my leaves, and number 8, which was the parasols. I think that's right. Oh, I'm not sure if that's the right piece. We'll check that one in a few moments. And then we've got number 6 and number 7. That's going to sit like that, because again, that's there, and that's number 9, and that's number 5, like so. I think I've picked up a couple of the wrong ones there, so I'm going to just rotate that round. So actually I might need to stitch an extra one myself, Paola. I think I'm going to admit I've made a mistake somewhere as well. So I've got 9 and 4, and this is where it's a good idea to check. So I've got fabric number 1, but I've got fabric number 4 there, which wouldn't normally be a problem, but because I've got these 2 together there, it doesn't quite work. So I'm going to stitch myself another little one of these in a few moments. And you've got to stitch a couple more yourself?
I do. But this is one of the things that I think because of the system that you have got is absolutely brilliant. So while we do this, so shall we
pass back over to Alex, because I think Alex has got a little bit of a reminder to give you with regards to the quilts. But of course we've got the 2 quilts. I'm going to hand over to Alex now. So this one's your spring purple, and then you've got your winter blue.
Lovely jubbly. Well, I hope you're enjoying the craft along so far. It's good, isn't it? Hayley is so good at explaining everything. Now, if you are just joining us, you have still got the opportunity to buy these gorgeous fabrics. And a lot of you have been very, very busy this hour, because obviously you've got the option to watch on rewind, on catch up. Now, what you've got are your 2 options, which are beautiful. The purple is amazing. Look at these wonderful colours. This is actually one of my favourite fabrics that's in here, because it's got those pinks and purples, really, really rich colours. And then you've got these slightly lighter tones to offset it. I mean, wow, you've got the oranges and the pinks too in here. Look at that. Absolutely stunning. And check this out. Isn't that gorgeous? And then we've got the one with the butterflies on. Gorgeous. Do you know what though as well? They are, I'm going to open up my favourite one. You've got some decent sized pieces in here as well when you're getting it. Look at this. It's a nice piece, isn't it? Now the kit includes 8.5 yards of fabric, but that's a really, really nice piece. Look at that. It's gorgeous. Oh, can you see me through it? Oh, I can. Yeah. So this is your gorgeous purpley option. It's called Spring Purple if you are buying it on the website. I've never been very good at doing this, folding it up. Oh, have I? Have I been all right? Oh, thank you. Thank you, voices in my head. Right, so that is your purple option. And there you go, that's the finished sample. And then let's take a nice look at our winter blue. Again, absolutely gorgeous fabrics. Also, as well as them looking gorgeous, they feel divine. These are such good quality fabrics that you'll be able to work with. Isn't that, look at that, beautiful. And then you've got again that deeper one as well. Stunning. And look at that. I do want you to send in more questions, of course, if you've got any questions for Hayley. Maybe you're a complete beginner and you're thinking, could I do this? I bet you could, but we'll check with Hayley. So there is your gorgeous blue option. It is really divine, isn't it? So as I said, you can still buy this. Now, we've got it on the show. Do you know, look at that saving. £59.96 saving. and it's on 2 flexi buys. Now, we are also in the midst of our Freedom Frenzy promotion, which means your first flexi buy payment is £40, which then means that if you're a Freedom member, if you pop in Freedom Frenzy, have I got that right? Just double checking the code, lovely. As your promo code, it means you'll get that £6.97 off if you're a Freedom member, or if you're not a Freedom member, you'll get free Freedom for the month. Obviously, if you want, you can opt out after that, but you can take advantage of all those benefits. Now, just to state as well, it is 1 per household during the event. Okay, so 2 payments of £40. Are you sitting comfortably again, though? Because we're going to return to Hayley now for the rest of the Craftalong.
Help us stir up a frenzy and join us from Thursday the 12th of March at 6 p.m. to Monday the 16th of March at 6 p.m. for our fabulous Freedom Frenzy event. Would you like the chance to try before you buy and receive a 1-month complimentary membership to our Hochanda Freedom family? Simply make a purchase of £40 or more during our event and you'll be given an exclusive promo code to receive unlimited standard delivery, exclusive Freedom member discounts, exclusive members badge and newsletter. Enjoy! But wait, for all our existing Freedom members who are already experiencing benefits, when you make your first purchase of £40 or more during our event, you'll also receive an exclusive promo code that will discount your purchase by £6.97. So don't forget to tune in or shop online to take advantage of what's on offer during our Freedom Frenzy from 6 p.m. on the 12th of March.
Well, hello, this is part 2 of the Craftalong with Hayley West here at Hochanda. And I'm the student and I'm learning so much.
Are you enjoying yourself?
I'm so loving it. First of all, because the fabrics are super soft and beautiful to look at. And of course, you are, well, we have done the first part, which was...
That's right, we're getting into our second hour now, yeah?
Yeah, you taught us how to cut cut the fabric and then how to sew them. And now what are we going to do next?
Well, we've obviously cut out our triangles and we've done all those diagonal seams to make them back into squares. And following the little chart that I mentioned in the first hour, we're going to be working on those first 2 rows. So we're going to construct these 2 rows. So I'm going to fold that down the middle there just so as we can see. Concentrate on the ones that we're working on. So all I've done is I've taken the 8 squares that we stitched back together and I've put them into this series that we've got here. So number 9, of course, as we identified the fabrics earlier on, I can check that I've got my lace in the top corner there. So you can see number 9, which if I just borrow your chart there, you can see when we did our reference guide, we know that that's number 9. And it's a good opportunity for you to make sure that you've got those all right, because I actually made a mistake, which I've rectified now. And Paola finished earlier than me in the last round. That was because she didn't complete all of her squares, but we're caught up now, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. We definitely have,
Now, what we need to do is stitch these together in rows. So I'm going to slide these ones down just a little bit to start with. And what you tend to do is you stitch them in pairs.
Okay.
So we've got, obviously, these 2 need to be stitched together where that seam is. So we will take that one and lay it on top. Okay.
And this is where I think the quilting clips are now...
This is where the quilt clips come in really useful, because this means I can now take a little quilt clip and I can put it, when obviously you're lining up to get it as near as you can do with regards to lining up, but by putting that quilt clip there, and also you can check it, so I can kind of open it up and make sure, and cross-reference with my chart if I want to make sure that those diagonals are going in the right way, to make sure that I've chosen the right squares with the right fabrics. And at this stage, I've not committed to anything because I haven't stitched it. So that's going to be my first little joining, and then the next one is going to be the next, like so.
Oh, I think I love this idea of the quilting clips. That's gonna be definitely in my basket. I'm looking on the website.
Well, this is it. As time goes on, you'll pick up all sorts of different tools and equipment to help you on your way. Initially, if you're cutting things like your squares, then a rotary cutter is useful, and obviously the ruler that we've been working with. Quilting clips are always useful to have, but some people prefer to use pins. I always get myself in a bit of a pickle and I end up scratching myself with pins, so I tend to shy away from those. And then then as time goes, in the next section we'll be working with some safety pins that will be useful as well. Cutting mat, pressing mat, all of these are things that you can kind of get as time goes on. You don't necessarily need them all together, but you will find that once you've invested in them, it tends to be that you've got them for life, really.
Indeed.
So as long as you look after
and definitely I'm going to go for the quilting clips. You can they are on the website, $9.99 from Daisy and Grace, and you can choose whichever 3 you wanted. So for instance, you can choose, of course, me being me, I will go for 3 sets of reds. However, if you're more adventurous, you could go for 1 blue, purple and pink, or green, of course, and then that way you will have 3 sets of them for $9.99.
Okay. So now that we've got our little squares and that we're putting together, we can just take them to the machine, and exactly the same way as we did before, we're going to do the 1/4 inch seam. And again, if you didn't catch us earlier on, your machine may well have a little line like so. So as long as your needle is sitting in the centre, you will get that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Sometimes you might have a 1/4 inch foot, just depends on the machine that you've got. Something I've not mentioned as well, when you actually put your fabrics together, when you're pressing them open, you may come across these little corner pieces. Some people like to trim those off to reduce the bulk when you're stitching everything together. I personally usually don't bother because I'm a bit of a lazy sewer sometimes, so yeah, don't bother. But yeah, if you want to, you can do, and sometimes it makes it easier for you to line those up. But you can imagine, with the big quilt, you're making 80 squares. Yeah. That's a lot of little corners that you've got to trim away.
Indeed.
How are you getting on over there?
Yeah, I'm just enjoying sewing this. But that's a top tip, because I thought that you had to cut those corners every time. But the fact that, you know, it still is quite time consuming. So now knowing that I can not cut them, it gives me a little bit more time to...
I'm sure if you were making a quilt for a competition or something like that, then that you'd be marked down in points for it. But we're not. We're sewing. We're having a little bit of fun with this, and that's what it's all about, the enjoyment. And the fact that when you actually make your quilt, you might not necessarily see those bulky elements in there anyway. It's not a bad habit to get into, to snip them off, but as I say, life's too short. I just don't do it. I'd rather be sewing.
It's one of those ones that now, for instance, I can do them, and I know that I will put those beds into the stuffing book. I just think it's the most genius.
I've got kind of like a plastic bucket on my sewing machine table, whoops-a-daisy, on my sewing table, and all I do is just throw them into the bucket, and then when the bucket's full, put them into a bag and then start again. But it just saves you throwing anything away.
It is. Well, you know my new thing, zero waste crafter. So anything that we can save it for something else and repurpose it, you know, it just makes sense, and it gives us, you know, I think I find a lot of joy by repurposing things, and this is what I think quilting and patchwork is so enthralling, because you're repurposing different elements.
And it could be that you're repurposing fabrics from garments. I mean, there's a lot of people do memory projects now as well. When sadly we lose people and they pass away, then quite often people will take garments, make teddy bears, or maybe you've got somebody a little older that might not want a teddy bear, then why not make them a little comforting blanket or a quilt, should I say. Now, we've obviously made our little squares into kind of rectangles now, so we're just going to press those open again as we're working our way through. And again, it's iron of your choice. Do you go for the one that I'm working with here, the quilter's iron, or you go for your little prim iron?
It's kind of
personal choice, really.
Yeah, it is. I kind of like this smaller one for portability, but I think probably if I had a designated area, or if I did have to iron any clothes, I would go for that one.
Well, do you know what? I would use both, because when you're working on a smaller project, as in the little pieces here, the little iron is perfect. But can you imagine the larger quilt actually going over it with a little tiny iron? You'd be there forever, wouldn't you? So it's useful to have both.
And also, the kind of thing I'm thinking of is like, I don't have a proper iron. I just have a traveling one. So hence why the Olisa one would make a lot of sense to go for.
There you go.
Oh, I don't know. I'm still deciding. Probably I will end up with both, knowing myself.
As time goes on, you probably will find that you do. It's just one of those things. Now, again, I'm going back, and Paola will probably join me again in a few moments. We're going to start putting these pieces, the rectangles, together. Again, just making sure keep going back to your reference guide, making sure that you've got them in the right places. What we would normally do is, when you're working from your quilt, obviously your quilt is on the larger scale. I'll pull this back in again because we're doing a smaller version. We're just doing the kind of 16 block centre that we've got here because we're making a cushion to match our quilt. Again, just using what's left over within the quilt kit. So across the top here, this would be your first row. So you'd basically have all of those squares which you'd put together in your little pairing. So that would be that pairing, then that pairing, and that pairing. And then you would put the pairings together, so you've got a little row of 4.
Okay.
So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to follow our smaller chart. So the 2 rectangles that we've got here, we're going to again do exactly as we did before. Take those over. And what you can do is actually lock those seams. So where you've got your diagonal seam like so, make sure that they're lined up. And if you have got the seam allowance going in opposite directions, then they will lock in.
The only thing I'm a beginner, absolute beginner. I just like literally awake with my new sewing machine and everything. Now this will happen.
Okay.
Okay, so do I need to put them like this, or do I need to put them?
Well, what you will find is, can I just borrow your pieces just for a second? You just need to keep an eye on when you're actually doing that. The little things can happen with your cutting, with your seams. If you're slightly off your 1/4 inch seam allowance, then it can throw things off.
I see it,
sometimes that can happen, but it's not. You can unpick it if you're wanting to, but that's not an issue. If you can, then just line up like so, and then what you'll sometimes find is you can kind of stretch your fabrics a little bit. On this particular occasion, you are going to be stretching it a fair distance, so you might be a case that you would look at unpicking and having a little go at that, because even if you've gone, you can see here down at the beginning there, you've probably got your 1/4 inch, but then it goes off a little bit.
It does,
So sometimes that can add to it, but I wouldn't worry too much at the moment.
It doesn't matter. I mean, it kind of, I always have got rows around it. I'm thinking of trimming.
But you'll see, because when I actually stretch that, you have got a little bit of stretch there, so you can sometimes stretch it a little bit. And if you are finding that one of these edges here is your outside edge, then sometimes you can kind of get away with your binding and not worry about that. It's the ones where you're joining pieces together that sometimes it can go off. But I would just stitch those together, Paola. We're not going to worry about it all being on point or anything. So just take that straight edge and just stitch them together. As I say, it's meant to be a bit of fun, and as I say, it's got a personality, hasn't it? So
definitely. Mine definitely are going to have lots of personality.
That's not a problem at all. So again, I've got my 2 rectangles now. I've put them face to face, as I've mentioned. I've put my little quilt clips in place. So then I'll be taking it to the machine and again stitching my 1/4 inch seam on both of these to make these 2 rows that we've been looking at here. Bring the machine back in again.
So I'm going to go in, and I'm going to use the top tip that, you know, again, when I say I learned so many things from every single guest from Hochanda.
We have some fabulous sewing guests that come along and teach us.
This one was from, I think it was the first time I saw it done, it was from Pat from Totally Patched.
Oh yes.
To use a piece of fabric to start off the chain stitching.
A thread catcher. Yes,
And then of course one of the sews from Daisy Chain, she said that's a great idea, and also you can do it at the end. So much, and I love it, and that I'm learning every day that I'm coming to work.
That's it, a little thread catcher would be a little piece of fabric that you kind of run, when you come off your fabric there, you run onto your little thread catcher. It minimises the actual thread that you're using, because as you can appreciate, if I actually take this out now and I pull that and I'm going to cut my threads there, I am wasting a lot of thread with that. All that thread would be wasted, whereas if I'd got a thread catcher, I'd probably only be wasting about that much thread. So yeah, I am being a little bit extravagant, shall we say, with my thread usage.
Wow.
Now again, moving my sewing machine out of the way, just so as we can press these little blocks, because now we've actually got the lines, the rows that we were looking at creating. So again, we're going to refer back to the pattern again in a few moments and stitch these back together.
I love this. I mean, the thing is, I'm usually with paper, I am a bit of a perfectionist. When I'm crafting at home, everything has to be, and I spend a lot of time creating. With now fabrics, I'm as proud of these just these rows that are all uneven and all wonky, as I am of the most perfect heart that I have ever made.
Oh, well, this is it. And at the end of the day, you will still make a quilt. You will still make a cushion. It doesn't. You still made something that's purposeful. So yeah, it's nothing to worry about in that respect. Now we've got our rows. So what we're going to do is going to line them up, and this is again where you're going to try, if you can, to actually match up those seams. This is where your straight pins can come into use if you've got straight pins, because you can actually use those to go through the seam. But again, I just tend to clip them.
Okay.
And then clip on each one where they're meeting up, so glasses will go on again, and then just clip those in place.
I need to get
and then
some
the
of those
fine
glasses.
sets. Oh, there comes a point, Paula, when you have to submit and go for them.
It's just one of those, but you know what? I'd rather see what I'm doing than.
Well, my glasses are on and off because it's. I need them for close-up work, but not for distance. So and then once you clip them together, you're going to stitch that complete seam right the way through. And this is all that it is. All that quilting is taking pieces and stitching them together until you get the piece of fabric to the size that you need for your project. Obviously, on this occasion, we're kind of making a cushion to work with the quilts that we've got within the Craftalong kit. But it could be that you're using fabrics, it could be you're making a bag when you've actually put the fabrics together. Turn your scraps into something that will end up being a usable piece that you can craft with.
I love this fabric so much.
It is pretty fabric. It's lovely to work with. I mean, my stitching is a little bit messy. I've not trimmed off threads and things like that, but obviously if you're at home, you'll take a little bit longer. We're doing it all a little bit speedy quick during the Craftalong as well. We've achieved a lot, I think, in the time that we've been going.
And of course, well, you have told us and prepared so much, but I need to remind everybody that you will be able to find the Craftalong online on the website as well as other video platforms. But the nice thing is that you will be able, even if you go now for the kit, you will be able to craft along once that you receive the quilts. Oh well.
There we go. So we've got rows 1 and 2 of our little mini pattern put together. How are you getting on over there, Paula?
I mean, can I say that at least the center is centered. Everything else is a little bit wonky, but like
this is why I'm saying it's a good idea to do a practice piece before you go straight in with your large piece. Obviously, what we've got here are the leftovers, so you could cut out your main pieces and then in your scraps, which you've got a lot of your scrap pieces, then make up something that you're practicing on and getting used to the feel of the machine and everything.
I mean, even the back.
Okay. Now you're working with a larger piece there, Paula. By all means, if you want to use a larger iron to press it, you can do. Just shout.
That's fine. That's fine. It's just kind of. I like it, the small one.
Now, what I did is I took the liberty of putting together rows 3 and 4.
Thank you so much.
Following on what we did for those first 2 rows, I've already done for rows 3 and 4. So obviously we've just been working on that top section there. If I open that out, we've got obviously your 16 patches that we're putting together to make our block for our cushion. So all I need to do is make sure that I'm putting it together correctly. So again, this particular row that we've got here, it's saying, I think I've stitched it together the wrong way. Hang on, let me just have a little look. Let me recap. 6 and 7, 5 and 9. Oh, no, I haven't. No, I haven't. No. So it is the right way round. So
you have it like this, isn't it? Oh, no.
I think we're okay. I think we're okay.
Yeah, you are okay.
Yeah, 9 and 4. 1 and 3.
It's me that I have it wrong.
Yeah.
That's.
You okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It works. Yeah.
As long as you've got, what we're doing at the moment, because we're putting them together, you should have like a square forming in the middle. So as long as you've got that, it's a very forgiving pattern, to be honest, because when you look at it, because you haven't got just a straight contrast between, say, a pale pink and a dark purple, and that's it, it's very forgiving. So if you haven't got them perfect, I
just think it looks, whatever way you're going to end up with, it's going to look amazing.
So you can see I've already put little sticky notelets here for rows 3 and 4, so we can get rid of those now. It was just so as I had that the right way around when we put it all together. And then again, Paula, you're almost ahead of me there. That is going to come on top of there like so. And then you're just going to line up those pieces there and then stitch them together. And that will be our quilt top in effect put together. Now the quilt top is what your kit will enable you to do, obviously on a larger scale if you're going for the Craftalong kit. It'll be big enough for you to put onto a double bed. With the drape down the sides, but it will also be big enough to sit on the top of a double bed if you're wanting to, so it wouldn't drape down the sides, it would just sit quite neatly on the top. Now when I'm putting these pieces together, some of the key points of this particular design are that centre point there, so I really want that kind of intersection there to line up. So what I'm going to do is make sure that when I line those up together, I have got that lined up really well there. But this is where sometimes you can have a little bit, you see here when I'm lining up these little blocks here, you've got a little bit of a give there. That is kind of a bit baggy, saggy there. So you can kind of stretch your fabric sometimes to get away with them. It depends where the cut is, but I'm not worried too much. I'm just going to take the outside edge and kind of stretch it out and bring it together that way. So yeah, don't beat yourself up about it.
No, the thing is that this is, I always think that crafting and whatever hobby you have is about enjoyment.
It is.
And if you enjoy to make it perfect, then good for you. You know, it's like great. But if you are like me, that you just enjoy the process of building, it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not.
Exactly.
That's what makes me happy.
It's the fact that you've made it, you've achieved it. So again, you've got that all together. You're happy with that, Paola? We're going to stitch those pieces and then we will end up with our cushion cover and then we can start putting it together. Ooh. And I'm quite excited about this next stage because whenever we've done shows, we've never, as far as I'm aware, that I've not experienced a show where we've had a chance to take you on to the next stage.
Yeah, I know.
So this might be the stage that you may have well seen up until now when we've done shows, when we've seen quilt kits, where people have shown you how to put blocks together, but then it's what happens after that, and that's the thing that we don't always get to see on air. So that's the bit that I'm looking forward to us doing for the next kind of, well, a little less than 45 minutes, 40 minutes or so. So yeah, hopefully we'll manage to get it all done. If not, we'll have a good talk around it, but we've kind of covered the bulk of it now. Now I've gone off completely there, but not to worry. It will do for the purposes of what we're doing on TV today. So
I'm so happy my points are the 4 points are in.
Paola, don't make me look bad, please. I plead with you.
No. Well, I mean, look at this. This is okay. I'm showing you.
We're doing show and tell now.
The point is perfect.
I'm going home.
The points are fine. Then I'm going to show you the not so fine elements, but I do not care about it. You can see the gap in there.
But you know what? We're going to square this off, which is what I always suggest.
Oh, okay.
What you theoretically should do at every single stage, and I know there'll be quilters out there that will be screaming at the TV because I haven't told you about trimming down your squares.
Oh, I see.
Really, what you should be doing is each time you're putting your blocks together, your little patches together, you should be squaring them up and making sure that they are measuring however they would measure, so say 8 inches square or 3 inches square or whatever. We haven't done that. We've been concentrating on putting it together, which is why it goes a little bit higgledy-piggledy, because these are the elements that you would have usually kind of used your ruler and actually trim those away. But what we are going to do is we're going to trim it off to make it look more square, just because it will become easier as we're working with the next part. So I'm going to move that out of the way and bring in my, where did I put it?
Behind you. Just
behind me.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's behind you.
Got the rotating one. I don't know what I've done with the rotating one, but not to worry. This one will do for now.
The pink one.
The pink one somewhere. Oh,
do you want to?
Let me bring it in because it's useful when you're actually trimming your blocks down because you can rotate. Actually, it's a little bit too small for the block that we're working on.
Do you want to borrow the
It's fine. Don't worry at all. I can do it with this one, and then you can use that one, Paola. That's not a problem at all. So again, all I'm going to do, the lines on your cutting mat will help you find your centre points if you need into. And excuse me as I lean over, I'm just going to get that large ruler there, and then basically all you're doing is keeping the lines again on your ruler. The lines can sit on your seams, and if the lines are sitting on your seams, then it means that this is going to be a true kind of line from the seam that you've created. And as you bring it over to the edge, you might find that you're trimming bits off. Basically, bring the edge of the ruler to the fabric that's innermost. On this occasion I'm doing here, unless it's a huge chunk. If it's a huge chunk, then you can lose a little bit of that within your seam allowance, but as time goes on you'll kind of learn how to wangle it, for the want of a better phrase. But there you go, I've trimmed away that bit there, so that's going to be a little bit neater on that edge as we go. And again, we can do away with the pattern now because we don't need that. We're finished with the pattern.
Okay, it's gonna go in. I mean, I have got so much fabric too, but I use this one for the thread catcher.
Yeah.
And then.
And as I say, we're not looking for prize-winning quilts. We're looking at creating something that's going to look gorgeous and something that when people come round and say, "Oh, I love that quilt," you say, "Yeah, I made that."
Yeah. And also, I think for personally, is like the beauty of not having to do perfect things. It's the liberating aspect of just building something
you were
from.
saying this, and people take different things from quilting, and I love the, like you said, it's the feeling that you're taking something that looks like nothing because there are lots of little pieces and putting it together to make something that looks beautiful.
And it's just that pattern building, but in a way, actually, the fact that is all a little bit rough and ready kind of thing.
Is that rustic word again, isn't it?
Yeah, this is kind of almost an element of it looks beautiful still, even if it's not perfect, and that kind of applies to so many things in life. That is like the beauty is the whole thing, and the enjoyment that I have gotten as well from doing the whole aspect of the
So how are you getting on over there? Now,
I'm a little bit slow.
I know now Paola, I've known Paola for ages, and I know you'll be trimming and trimming because you want it scientifically straight.
Yeah.
But honestly, don't worry too much about it.
So I'm just gonna make sure that I cut these bits there just a little bit more.
Do you want to use the larger ruler? Or are you okay
that would
then?
be this. Yeah, that would be great.
This is where it's useful. I mean, you'll find, depends on the project that you're working on. Now, I think that all the rulers come together, don't they, in this set? Yeah,
actually, can I say, I found that would be, because I only have got this large one at home and I forgot to bring it. But the fact to have a smaller sizes as well, it means that for different types of cuts, I kind of wanted to have a smaller one.
You can get all sorts. You can get some that are square, some that are triangles. But once you've invested in them, you don't need them. You don't need to buy them again. So unless you manage to break one, which I don't think I ever have. But there you go.
Yeah,
you want those?
Yep.
Right, all done? Yep. So now we're going to be moving on to, because obviously, I mean, that is beautiful. That is a smaller version of the quilts that we've been working on. So it's a mini quilt. This could be the first quilt that you've ever created. Isn't it? I mean, it looks fabulous. Whether it's lined up, whether it's a bit wonky, it looks absolutely amazing. Paola, that looks beautiful.
Well, I'm so proud of this.
So you should be. So you should be. Now, if you were making it into a larger cushion, you might want to add another row, or you might want to add some additional fabric. But obviously, we're trying to keep it small so as we can fit all the different stages in. So the next stage, just move that just to one side, is when you start adding your wadding, and your wadding is that gorgeous soft element that you've got that's going to give you that warmth. Wadding, that is personal choice. You will have man-made, you will have natural. There's a whole host, and I know that we have got one that's actually from bamboo that we've got. That's your piece there.
Thank you.
So it's personal preference. The fabric, the wadding that we've got on the show is big enough for your large size quilt, and I did use that in both of those quilts, and it's beautiful to work with. So yeah, we might have it on the website, I'm not entirely sure, but with a whole variety of different waddings. I know that Hayley brings some, Joe from Mill Shop Online brings some backing fabric as well. You may well have some fabric. I've actually just used an old sheet here, but it could be whatever you obviously you can get your fabrics, and again, fabric wise, you can get fabrics that will be the full width of your quilt, or you might find that you have to stitch it. If you do need to stitch it, then all you need to do is take your two pieces, try and keep it so as your seam is in the middle of the back of your quilt. It doesn't have to be, but I will personally try and do that because it's just a neater finish. And again, you just do a 1/4 inch seam, you would open that out and you would press it, and you would have your piece of fabric big enough to go in the double side of your bed. Wadding is slightly different because you can actually piece your wadding together if you're wanting to. I would stitch it in the same way as you would do your fabric. What I would do is I would get my two pieces of fabric, obviously my wadding, sized together like so, and then you can do a zigzag to actually piece them together, because if you're putting them together and they're overlapping, then that's going to be quite a bulky bit to come through. So by putting them together like so and doing just nothing too tight with your zigzag, you might need to put a little bit of stabiliser underneath so it doesn't pull it in together. But just a gentle zigzag, a wide zigzag will actually piece those pieces. Perfect. Some machines have a joining foot or will have a joining stitch, but yeah, a zigzag would do that. Yeah. So you've got your wadding.
Yeah,
there's your backing.
Oh, thank you.
So the way that it works is the first piece that goes down is your backing fabric. Okay. So you put that down. And then on top of that you would put your wadding. Now I haven't actually measured these, so one may be bigger than the other, but it's not majorly important. Now when you're working on a large quilt, this is the bit that you're likely to be getting on your hands and knees for.
Oh, okay.
So you move your dining room table out the way, or maybe take your duvet off your bed.
Yeah, that's
so you've got a nice open area, because what you need to do is make sure that this is lovely and smooth. What you'll probably find is that it will automatically stick to your fabric, like so. So you can actually flip it over. Just make sure that you haven't got any creases or bumps or anything like that on the reverse of it. And it doesn't matter necessarily if it's not lined up, but just make sure, you can see on this edge here, we're very close to the edge there. So what I'd be tempted to do is to bring that fabric more into the middle, because I'd rather have a bit of an excess, a bit of a border all the way around.
Of wadding rather than...
So say something like that, and then make sure that it doesn't overlap at the edge here. But both of these pieces are actually bigger than our little quilts that we're making, so it's not the end of the world.
Okay, no, that's a very important...
But because what you will find is, and I actually found this personally when I was doing the quilts that we've got here, you're paying a lot of attention to actually putting that quilt top in place. And what you can find is as you work your way to your edges, you might be perfect on this side, but then you've run out of your backing and your wadding on the other side. So when you're pretty happy with that, and this is actually stuck together, smaller scale, it's easy to just flip that over. Okay. And you can see it's way bigger than the actual piece that we're working on here. Okay.
Just kind of checking.
Now, while Paola's just doing that, I've brought in some little safety pins. Safety pins are useful for you to actually put all your layers together.
Okay.
Because what you can do, you can move these around if you're wanting to, but it just means that pins, I find straight pins, I catch my fingers on there. So you can actually get quilting safety pins, and quilting safety pins are a little bit like this one where you've got kind of like a little kink in there. Can you see how you've got a little kink? Yep. Because it's going through multiple layers, sometimes I just use regular safety pins, to be honest. Not too precious about it. And what you're going to do is you're going to start from the centre and come out. Now you're not going to stitch through your seams, but what you're going to do is just put a little safety pin, and it's up to you how often you put these in place. But basically that's just going to pin all of your layers together. Okay. And what I tend to try and do is put a little safety pin in each one of those patches. Okay. But you're working from your centre out, and obviously it's smoothing out, because if you work from one side across, you might find that your quilt top has actually moved. Okay, yep. But if you do want to put a larger one and go across the seam, you can do. Just perhaps don't go into the seam, because you might find that it's it bunches things up. I've got all sorts of different shapes and sizes with these safety pins. I don't know where they've come.
They all do
it's like
the
a nappy pin almost, that one there.
They all do the job.
And then again, you just work your way around. So of course, if you've got 80 of these patches that you're putting together, it is quite time consuming, but it is a good exercise to do, because it means that even when you're picking up your fabric and you're moving it around, then you're not having to worry it's not moving those layers together. And just pinning those as you go, like so. You all right over there, Paola?
I am. I'm just one of the things that I love about the patchwork and quilting is the fact how once you have to pay attention for the first step within the first, layer.
It's very mathematical.
Exactly. Yeah. And then once that you've I know how to put the safety pin through the layers. Yes. Then it's
you can almost relax at this stage. And it is. I think the most nerve-wracking bit is making that first cut of your fabric.
It is.
Especially if it's a say it's your Liberty fabric or something like that. You want to make sure it's right, don't you?
Guess who has gotten even more Liberty fabric today? I did get the fat quarters from the winter one collection.
It looks amazing.
The full collection, and then I bought some just now from. And I did get some from the Alice Caroline show as well.
Oh, this morning, yes.
Yeah.
fabulous fabrics.
I did miss out on the set of charm packs, the 20 sets of 5x5. But you know what? I hope she will be back soon.
I think you've probably got enough to keep you going, Paola. Enough to keep you out of trouble.
But it's one of the things that I enjoy doing, and I never thought I would, was this week when I discovered this box that I had forgotten I had with beautiful Moda fabric and other you know, liberties as well, a tiny bit of liberty, is I actually enjoy even ironing it.
Okay.
Because it's the beauty of the patterns and things like that. I'm thinking of the ideas I'm going to, you know, what I could do.
Is it? Now, just while Paola's popping the last of those safety pins in, I'm going to go on to the next stage, which is the actual phrase quilting. When we talk about quilting, what we've done so far is we've pieced these fabrics together. Quilting is the nature of stitching your 3 layers together. So your top, your wadding and your backing coming together. This is actual quilting that we're doing now. So anything else that you hear it referring to is basically piecing your fabrics. Just going to fold that over just while I bring my machine back in again, because what we're going to do is stitch through all of the layers to make sure that they don't move around. Now this is something that is key when you're working on a large piece, because the last thing that you want is big wrinkles and things appearing on your quilts. Smaller pieces, you don't always have to do it, but obviously to explain how to do it within the show is a good idea. This is where your extension table comes in useful, because you can see we're working on a larger piece now, and with the Smarter that we've got as available on the show, you do get an extension table, which is basically going to support your fabrics as you work. Now, when you're actually stitching your fabrics together, and I know there'll be a lot of people that will go, oh, what on earth is she doing? I do suggest you're working from the centre outwards. Now, quite often people would work from the centre far edge and stitch right the way down to the bottom, which you can do. But personally, I would suggest you start from the middle point, especially with it being your first quilt, just in case you've got any errors on the outside. As time goes on and you build your confidence, yes, by all means go from edge to edge, but I just think it makes it easier to start with, to work from the centre. And if you imagine ripples going outwards, it's just you've got the ability to smooth everything out from the centre, which is easier than trying to retrieve at a later stage. And what we're going to do is going to do what is called stitching in the ditch. Okay. So stitching the ditch. Now you can get a special foot that will allow you to do this, which has got like a little blade that will sit in that little seam that you've got there.
I see.
But what we're doing is we're going to be taking our stitches and we're stitching where you've got that seam. Now go slowly with it, you're not going to win any prizes for going fast, and all you're doing is you're going to follow going across like so. Some people will, and I think Ali does this, will actually bring your threads, so your bobbin thread comes up from underneath as well, so you've got both of your threads sitting on the surface. That's personal preference. I know a lot of people will do that, and if you are doing quilting the proper way, that's the way you should do it. But we're just enjoying ourselves, we're learning how to quilt. So all I'm going to do is basically just take my time. Don't watch your needle, because your needle's not going to move. What you're looking at is where you are feeding your fabric through. Now on my particular machine, I've got a little gap there, so I'm making sure that this seam here is lining up with that gap. Paola, the foot on your machine may look slightly different, I don't know, but you will find that just finding that little point, you just follow it across like so. Now, if you're fortunate and all your patches are on point and they all line up, then you'll be able to find that you do that in a continual run like that. Go past your fabric, like so. You don't have to go far beyond your fabric, but then that fabric is all quilted together, all 3 layers. So if I look on the underside, you'll be able to see. Now that went a little bit messy at the front there, but that's where I was getting started. So I'm going to trim that away there and then go back to the beginning. You potentially wouldn't get that if you're going right the way across. And then all I'm going to do is do it from the opposite side. So that seam then is going to be complete going right the way across. Okay. So again, I'm going to go back to that centre point.
It's the first time I have quilted. Is it?
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
The first of many, I hope, Paola.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's so nice the feeling of going through the different layers. It's incredible. That's it.
Now, if you do go slightly off kilter, it's not the end of the world. You're using a thread that's exactly the same colour of your fabric, so you won't tend to see it too much, so don't worry too much, but there you go. Again, I've gone off the side there, and then I'm just going to pull my threads. And then this time, because I've kind of got it sitting and it's being supported there, I'm going to go across and do the kind of the cross. I've done a cross there all together. I'm going to come straight the way down the middle, and then again you would just work your way out from the centre if you're doing your patches. I'm just going to do the cross down the middle and then leave it as that, because I would love to be able to show you a little bit about the binding as well.
Okay.
You okay over there, Paola?
Oh, I am. I think, well, I mean, it's like you said, I'm not going to win any competition, but
you never know, Paola. One day you might. Now, I've just done something which, and this is where I've just realised I should have gone from the middle out. Can you see here on mine where I've got a little bit of bunching there now? Yeah. So I've got a little lip there. If I'd have actually stitched from the centre outwards, then I wouldn't have got that. Also, a walking foot can help you, because at this stage, the foot that we've got on here is only making contact with the top layer of fabrics, and the feed dogs are only making contact with what's underneath. The fabric in the middle, the wadding, is kind of hitching a ride, so to speak, and it's not got any contact with a foot at all, which is why a walking foot will regulate the way that your fabric is passing through. So on this occasion, put the foot back down again, you will just keep an eye on that, and perhaps just for the first few stitches make sure that you are stitching from the centre. Now here my seam's gone slightly off kilter, so you can see there my it's not on point. That particular, if I was to carry on sewing now, I'm going to be to the side of there. So what you can do is just raise your needle up, and this is what I would do, which again, I'd probably be shouted at by the Puritan quilters out there, but it's still stitching everything together. And well, I think anybody that would spot that would deserve a prize, really, when it comes to the end project. And there we go, just running off the edge there. And this is why I'm saying I'm not a big rules follower. At the end of the day, I want to make myself a pretty quilt that looks nice in my home. And there you go, you can see you can stitch everything together. And it's gone a bit funny in the middle there because I didn't actually have the feed dogs down. I've still got not the feed dog, the foot pressed down, the presser foot. Oh gosh, whoops-a-daisy. How are you getting on over there, Paola?
I'm really
All done?
So, well, I mean, I've done 2 lines. I don't know, I haven't done everything.
Oh, actually, I'm going to bring the machine back in again. Usually, you would have all of those layers stitched together. What I am going to do is I am just going to go around the parameter of my little quilt that I've made here, just because it's going to make the next stage a little bit easier. If you've done all your blocks and you've done all of your marks, mind you, we haven't got many to do, have we? Shall we do it? Shall we do it? No, I'm going to just quickly race around the edge just while Paola's working on hers.
I'm just kind of doing...
Just because it'll speed things up when we come to it. So all I'm doing is I'm going right to the very edge of the fabric now, just quilting these together, just so as it makes it a little bit easier when it comes to doing your binding. So...
Okay, I see.
So these little stitches, you wouldn't normally do this, you just carry on doing that stitch in the ditch that we've done, work your way around, but I want to get on and show you how to do the binding, because again that's something else that's not really been covered during any of the shows, and I did promise everybody that I would try and do that. So how's it looking, Paola?
Well,
Are you pleased?
I'm so pleased. Can I show you the bag? I mean, there is a little bit of a thread here, but look at that, that's half perfect. Yes.
Well done.
It's so enjoyable. And I was a little bit scared, like to quilt, because of course I thought, well, how it doesn't fit with the wording, and it's 3 layers, I'm gonna get it wrong, and now it just feels so nice.
Well, this is it, and I think if you take the pressure off yourself, I mean, it's a very dramatic looking quilt, but it's very easy because we're looking at those triangles and squares. That's all that we've done. There's no tricky seams or anything like that, so it's not an overcomplicated project to work on. Just going to do this little row down here because I know we are rapidly running out of time, and I want to talk about binding. So binding is when you finish off your quilt. Okay. Now, there's a variety of different ways you can do the binding. If you just took the quilt top that we've just made, you could stitch it in right sides together, turn it out, and you wouldn't need to bind it. But I just think a bound quilt just looks beautiful. So that's why I like to do the binding. So if you remember, when we actually cut out our fabrics earlier on, we cut our binding. So you should have some strips within your little box that were from your binding fabric. Now I'm just going to trim my quilt down very quickly. Again, you would usually do this with your rotary cutter, but just for speed, I'm just going to come pull this down. Now, when it comes to your binding, you need to actually stitch your strips together, because the binding needs to go right the way around the outside of your quilt.
Okay.
Now our fabric is 40 inches wide, so naturally it's not going to be big enough a width to run right the way around the edge. So we have to join our fabrics, and you do that with a mitered edge. Okay. So you need, have you got 2 pieces of those fabrics there? Yep. Okay. So I'm going to teach you how to do a mitered edge. So I've just trimmed my quilt down because we're going to do that in a little while. Pal, you don't need to worry about this bit for now.
I can rewatch on catch up. Of course, the Craftalong will be on the website.
Time's running away with us, my goodness. So, when you actually got your, move that out of the way so I can show you better here. When you're making your binding, a nice easy way for you to get continual run, because that obviously is 40 inches wide. We need to make it near enough 80 inches wide and beyond that to go around our quilt. So what you do is you cross over your pieces like so. Okay. Now I haven't got a straight pin, but not to worry. You would normally just put a little pin on there, and what we're going to do is actually stitch these together across there, that mitered edge. So if you've got little straight pins, you can use those, Pal. I don't know if you brought any with you. I forgot to bring mine.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I will remember this.
And then all we're doing is just make sure that when you are stitching them, that your fabrics overlap, because you need to go over that area. So we're going to stitch here. You're not going to cut your fabrics at all at this stage. So we're going to go from that little kind of notch in there into this little notch here, like so.
That one and that one.
Okay. That one. Okay. And then just, you can draw a line if you want to, or just do it by eye. It's entirely up to you, whichever you feel more confident with. And then just go across like that. And then you'll see there that when I actually open this out, that will be a continual piece. Okay?
Yeah, sorry.
That reaction. I'm going to do that again. You join them together like that.
No, you don't get it the second
I don't
time.
Get it
It's a genuine.
It's just a one ooh deal.
No. It's like, this is what the thing happens with me. You only get it, one.
That's fine. I can cope with that. And then all you're going to do is literally press that seam. I do tend to like to press the seam open because I just feel it's less bulk. So whereas we've pressed our seams to one side or the other previously, open that up and that will sit nice and neatly, like so. Okay?
Okay,
There you go. So that is our binding. Then what we need to do is actually fold it in half. Now, there's lots of different ways you can do your binding, but what I tend to do is I fold it in half like so. There's certain rulers you can get that will allow you to do that. I've got, which one have I got here?
Oh, I like
this one. So I've got
this
one, which is where am I? It's the June Taylor one. Yeah. Which we might have on the website.
We did have them on the show when June Taylor, when Jill was here from June Taylor.
And this one will allow you to basically make your binding. You just feed it through. There's loads of different ways you can do this. So just very quickly, I'm just going to kind of press this as it feeds through. Yeah. In fact, you can do it the other way around. Yeah, I think it's meant to go that way around. Whenever that iron makes that noise, I always think there's something gone wrong with it. But it's a bit weird when you hear an iron just doing its own thing. So pulling that through like so, and then you just continue until within your pattern it will tell you how long your binding needs to be to go around the outside of your quilt. But I'm just going to do a little bit there, and again you just keep folding it in half and feeding it through as you need it. In fact, we've probably got enough there to do. What sort of time have we got left?
So we have got 12 minutes.
About 12 minutes.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
12 minutes.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to...
I think that our board needs to be in my stash as well.
It is useful. It's taken me a while to get one of these, I must admit, but it is a useful little tool.
I like also the fact that, and there's so many different tools that you can go without, but also make it the whole experience much easier. And I love that.
Now, with quilting, actually putting your binding in place, you've got options. You can stitch it so as it will, you're doing it on your machine, or you can do it on the back, you can stitch with your machine, or you can actually hand stitch it to finish it off. It took me days to actually hand stitch the purple one that we've got. I did both with these, so just be aware of that. It can take a long time to do this, but the stage is do your research, because there are two different ways to do it. If you're doing it with your stitching it in place, then you actually attach your binding from the back, raw edges to the back. If you're hand stitching, then your raw edges will come to the front, and then you will wrap it round like so and hand stitch it. We're going to do it on the machine, or I'm going to do it on the machine, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to clip that down the side there, but I want to show you how to do the corners, because the corners are a bit tricky as well.
That's what it does.
So I'm just going to clip that like so.
Oh, thank you for showing us the binder, because that's the one thing that I haven't learned, and now I know how to do it. Now I can watch him back, and of course you clip it on. Okay, so you're clipping it on like so, and then what you will do is you bring your machine in, and you're still doing 1/4 of an inch with regards to this. So I'm just going to start it off again. So again, 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to take it onto the side there. Now when you're actually doing your quilt, you should leave a little bit of a gap there, because you're going to work all your way round. I might need to do a little bit of a, on one of our green days, do a little tuition on binding a quilt, just to show you, because we're going to be very rushed at this stage. But you leave it, you don't stitch right the way to the edge of your fabric, you're just going to come a little way along. And then all you're going to do is you're going to do that 1/4 of an inch and stitch along the edge. And what you're going to do is actually stop when you come to the edge here. So I'm going to go along and then basically finish at the point where you've got about 1/4 of an inch of your seam left there. Okay? If you've got 1/4 inch foot, it will help you. And then all you're doing is you're basically angling it and you're running off your fabric. Okay, and then when you bring your fabric out, what you will do is you'll actually put your thumb in there. So put your thumb in the pocket there and pull it up like so and move it out of the way, and then continue with your 1/4 of an inch down that way. So again, you would carry on down, and I'll do part of this one because again, it's one of those ones that we haven't got a huge amount of time to get it all done. I so wanted to get everything done, but well, it's
just been a bit ambitious, really. So we've got further than we could have done.
Well, the thing is that you have explained and done, you know, everything a single
we
step.
We need a 3-hour Craftalong. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to run it down. Now, obviously, you would do that. You'd run right down to the edge of your quilt, and you'd do exactly as I spoke of before. So again, I'm just going to stop that, pull that out there, like so. And then what will happen is, when you come to stitch it in place, you'll go all the way round. So let me see if I can kind of doctor this. I don't think I'll be able to do it, to be honest. But usually you would continue round, and then when you come to this point, you'll be stitching your fabric in the same way to the back, and you'll have these overlapping. So what you're going to do at this point is basically do a similar sort of mitre to how you did before. So when you actually open that up, they are going to be perfectly flat on the back there. So you'll have one going one way, one going the other. Again, I'll show you that on one of the little YouTube things. I'll speak to our marketing guys and we'll organise that. But all you would do there is pull that round like so. A clip like so. You'll clip like so. And then when you come to that little mitered corner, you would just kind of just tuck one in and wrap that one round like so. Obviously you'll have pressed this, but because we're doing it speedy quick, I'm not going to press it. And then you're basically working your way around. So it depends on how whether you go left to right or right to left on that mitre. It doesn't matter, but just try and make sure so it's nice and neat like that. So the fabric coming in is the same width as the fabric coming out. And then all you would do is you take it to your machine again. Okay, and then I'll move that clip out of the way. And then all you do is you would stitch at the front there, like so. And just a little tiny touch in, you're only talking a few millimetres in, you're going to stitch through all of those layers. So it's just a smidging in, like so. And you're going to come up to where you've got that little mitre point. At this stage, you might want to use like a little stiletto or something like that just to hold your fabric, because obviously you can't get your fingers in there. Just get your needle to stop in the downward position. Then rotate your fabric, and then you'll come around the corner again. But of course, you will have pressed this all in place, so it's going to be a lot neater than the one that I'm doing here. And then you would just carry on down.
Wow.
like so.
But it's so simple. Well, you make it look very simple, and something that you have completely opened my eyes on how to do it. This is such a, and the finish is beautiful.
It's the finishing touches, really. Now, I'm just going to finish that thread there. Obviously, we haven't gone all the way around, but you can see if I move the machine out of the way again, my right arm is going to have muscles on muscles, isn't it, coming up and down that machine. But there you go. So that's the effect that you would get. Obviously, you would go for a darker thread when you come to do your binding, but I think you'll see just how neat it is there. And on the flip side, it should be catching, because that's already part of that. You've already stitched that when you stitched it together to start with. You will have, obviously, your bottom thread showing, but you're not really going to look at the back there. But it's a lot quicker to actually finish your quilt that way than it is to actually go around and hand stitch in the back there. So yeah, nice little thing. And as I say there, you're just going to come all the way around, and basically your fabrics, when you come to this point, you'll stitch and you'll leave a gap, probably about so big, about 3 inches, 4 inches, depends on how easy you find it. And then you'll take that fabric and you'll overlap it, do the mitre edge again that we're talking of, and then you'll find it'll sit neatly, and you can just carry on continuing as you did before.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Hayley. Of course, it is a bit so. I learned so much, and I hope at home you have learned so much. Thank you, thank you.
Not a problem at all. I just wish that we'd got another hour, but we can't.
Now, if you just missed it all, here it is where the Craftalong is on the website, and there it is. You go to the Hochanda.com and you go to the schedule, and of course you look for Sunday the 15th of March, and then you'll scroll down to, of course, the Craftalong with Hayley West. Now I also have, and then of course you can see it, watch now, and of course you can watch it for 60 days. However, there is a page for Craftalong in which you can watch it for longer than that. And of course I'm gonna say thank you again to Hayley and then Alex as well.
Lovely jubbly. Right, Hayley, so did you get as much done as you wanted to?
I did, but it's just frustrating. I didn't get that last little bit in there. But as I say, we're fortunate we can do little YouTube things in our other little studio. So I'll speak to Kate and see if we can get that.
That would be marvellous. Okay, so we have an update, Hayley.
Okay.
Okay, so the buyers have said this is basically the last day that you can now get your lovely Craftalong kits. Okay, so please, if you're sat on the fence, I mean, these are gorgeous fabrics.
They're beautiful fabrics. And the thing is that you've got so much fabric in here. I mean, the quilts that we've been looking at, they would sit neatly on top of a full, as I say, a king-size bed.
Yep.
Drape down the size of a double. If you want to, make a smaller version for a single bed. But there's so much fabric left over. Myself and Paola have been working with the leftovers throughout the Craftalong. And you could make a mini quilt to work alongside this if you wanted to, or a bed runner or something like that.
Or I liked your idea about extra cushions, because I like matching things.
I do. I'm the same like that.
So, last chance to get it. It's going to be taken off the website, I think, tomorrow morning, something like that. So, again, feast your eyes on these wonderful fabrics. Obviously, you can watch back on Rewind.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Now, is it this one? Right, okay. This one is approaching limited, our spring purple option, and it is, as we've been saying, absolutely divine fabrics.
It is gorgeous. I mean, I love the colours with these ones. It's nice because you've got different shades of purple, you've got your pinks, you've got your oranges in here as well. So it will work with other colours that you might already have in your decor at home.
Absolutely. And then let's have another look at the bluey option. Blue. Yeah. I was thinking, actually, do we still get instructions with this?
Oh, gosh, yes. It comes, when the fabrics come to you, you've got your 9 different fabrics, but you will get, obviously, your inspiration sheet, which gives you the photography to show you your quilt there. But you will get all the layout there. So everything that myself and Paola have been working with, you will get all of that in there. And you can see there, it actually shows you how you can put those pieces together in colour as well, just in case you find it difficult grasping it with regards to the actual grey there. But the blue, I mean, it comes together beautifully. I'm going to have the blue one and putting it in my we're having an extension put in the kitchen. It's going to be a bit of a kind of chill out zone, and I think that's going to work well in there.
That sounds nice. Now, perhaps you've literally just joined us and you're thinking, oh, well, I missed the Craftalong. I didn't know it was on. Maybe you're new. Could a beginner do this wonderful project?
Easily. Very easy. Paola has got to grips with it very easily, because basically you're taking squares, you're cutting squares, and it's explained in the instructions the size of the squares that you're cutting. Then you're cutting them into triangles, then you're stitching those triangles back together in different combinations, then you're stitching the squares together, and then you're making your quilt. That's it. It's, when you break it down, you've probably only got, what, 3 or 4 different stages to make your quilt top. So it is nice and easy to do.
Lovely stuff. And then you'll be really chuffed that you've made it. And, you know, people come round, as you were saying, I heard you say earlier, people come round and go, oh, where did you get that quilt? And you go, you got the satisfaction of saying that.
But this is how heirloom quilts were have been brought together all through history, maybe stitching them by hand as time has gone on. But this is the kind of thing that would be passed on through generations. One thing to say though, on the back of your quilt, when you have completed, do yourself a little label, maybe embroider it or something like that, to say the date that you have created this. Because of course it's a modern day quilt to you, but in generations to come, they might like to know that Auntie Paola made this, or great Auntie Paola made this.
I do that with my cross stitch.
Well,
always date it.
Always do.
Yeah. Right, so as I said, last chance to get it. You won't be able to get this tomorrow. Please check that out. Thank you very much, Hayley.
Not a problem. Thoroughly enjoyed myself. I hope you guys did as well. You know where I am. If you've got any questions, just get in touch.
Lovely jubbly. Stay tuned. More next.